Correctional officers exposed to traumatic events in prisons and jails. The number one, in my opinion, traumatic event that correctional officers face is seeing a fellow correctional officer killed in the line of duty. Hi, I'm Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe if you like this video. Officers have been interviewed across the country, and their number one answer, in my opinion, has been when they see a fellow officer get stabbed by an inmate, killed by an inmate, beaten by an inmate, killed or severely beaten and survive. It's all traumatic to see this because you work with your fellow officer day in and day out, and you want to protect each other. It doesn't matter if you even get along with your fellow officer. When it's time for shit to hit the fan, you want to protect each other. It's just instinct. And when you see your fellow officer go down, it's a terrible thing. And then you see the suffering from family and friends. What do traumatic events or exposure to traumatic events in prisons and jails cause? Well, we're going to talk about some different types of traumatic events, but it causes alcoholism, self-medication, over-the-counter drug use, to the excessive needs from pharmaceutical drugs. Depression sets in, anger sets in, even hatred. Job problems, on-the-job problems. And then the worst of all is suicide, which we all know if you're in the correctional officers world, that suicide is one of the correctional officers have one of the highest rates of suicides besides the military and other jobs. Outsiders will never really fully understand what traumatic events take place inside our jails and prisons. I would recommend, and this is a very serious topic, but I would recommend that to the outsiders, the outsiders need to know, and I would recommend Prison Homicide, Killing and Dying in Prison Today by Dr. Joshua Long. He didn't just sit down and throw things on paper and publish it. This took about 3 years. He interviewed many correctional officers across the country and in other countries. He even interviewed incarcerated to ask them what traumatic events they have seen in prison. I'm giving you another reference so you have an option from just hearing from me. And for you outsiders out there that don't understand what correctional officers go to, another reference I'm going to give you is go directly to a correctional officer in your area and ask them what they face. I want to talk about also self-harm inmates. When officers see suicides throughout their career, they see inmates killing themselves and other inmates. This is number 2 on my list. Number 1, as I said, is correctional officers seeing a fellow correctional officer die in the line of duty. Number 2 is seeing what happens among the incarcerated when they have inmate on inmate homicide. They have self-harm. They're cutting themselves. They're opening their stomachs and pulling their intestines out. And you as an officer have to arrive on the scene and render first responder aid to this inmate who is tugging at his or intestines while you're trying to help them and calling for backup and calling for medical. Many officers have said, hey, when it comes to the inmate population, it's part of the job. You know, I have to deal with that. I have to render aid, and it doesn't affect me that much. And I can understand that because I was a correctional officer for 29 years. And I've seen inmate deaths. I've seen inmate suicides. I've seen inmate cuttings. I've seen, self-harm inmates. And I have to say that although I sometimes felt like it didn't bother me, death just gets to you no matter what. I don't care how tough of a shell we have, how hard a shell we have. Death behind the walls of prison is like being on a battlefield in the military and seeing death. Somewhere down the line, it's going to get to you. Here's my point with all of this I'm talking about. I do not want anyone to feel like they're walking on an island alone. Please remember that it's okay to ask for help. If you're turning to alcoholism or pills, or you're feeling anger, or you're feeling anxiety, and if you ever get the feeling of you're on an island alone and you want to harm yourself, please, please, please talk to someone. Talk to a family member. Talk to a friend. Talk to a fellow correctional officer. Reach out, because you are not alone. And you are also not belittling yourself to ask for help. You're actually showing your inner strength when you ask for help. Okay? That's my message here. Something outsiders will never understand, and I wish they would. Because if they fully understood what can happen when you're exposed to traumatic events inside jails and prisons, maybe our legislative folks and our lawmakers would help enhance the wellness for correctional officers. We need mental health wellness checks regularly. We can't do enough talk about this topic. We could talk about it every day. And we need to talk about it. And with that said, I'd like every supervisor out there to remind your officers that you're there to help them if they need it. Check on them. Do wellness checks on duty. Ask your officers if they're okay. Ask your officers if they need help. And let's let our officers know they have a place to turn in times of need. Please, watch out for each other. And God bless you, and thank you for the job you do every day behind that wall. A job that no one really knows about. And no one really knows what goes on. Thank you. Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe.